Human rights issues have been a very high materiality risk for investors, especially now that we're focusing on climate actions, just transition mechanism. And when we look at the food sector, it has a massive and significant contribution, but also at the same time massive implications when it comes to sustainable investments. This is why we need to shift our mindset to focus on human rights and consider it as the backbone of our just transition mechanism, ensuring that no one else is left behind while we are transitioning towards a climate economy. And more investee companies need to put more spotlight on supplier engagement, incentives, and actually able to evaluate the impact reporting, which will then be useful for investors to track and to evaluate and make an informed decisions. And the time is now to change the mindset, but also to push for companies forward when it comes to not only disclosures, not only meeting regulatory compliance, but actually asking and putting in place the right practice, walk the same talk, be on the same page with all the industry stakeholders and leaders.
So for the fast-moving consumer goods companies that AIM Progress work with, so that's food and agriculture companies, cosmetics, household goods, the main human rights issues that continue to be challenges for them are really forced labour and child labour. They're systemic issues, they're driven by poverty and many other complex factors. Identifying those issues for companies is a real challenge. How do you find forced labour? How do you find child labour in your supply chains can be really difficult. And then the solutions to them aren't easy ones. They're not quick wins. They're ones that involve a landscape approach. You need to work with companies, you need to work with governments. So I think those are two issues that I'd highlight particularly. What are we seeing companies doing to try and address human rights issues in our sector? A lot of it is driven by the legislation, implementing a really strong human rights due diligence approach, working really hard to do what they can to map risks in their supply chains. Engaging with suppliers is a real area where we've seen a lot of progress over the last 5 years, lots of very active conversations, capacity building with suppliers, and starting to really engage with workers and engage with projects in really high-risk supply chains, whether that be palm oil, sugar, or kind of cocoa. So we've seen a real change in the approach that companies are taking. And what would we be looking for investors? I think we're looking for a really active engagement on companies who are taking a leadership role in this area. So companies who have leaders, CEOs and CFOs that understand what human rights challenges are, that understand that these are long-term risks that need to be addressed. They can't be quick fixes. They're not solved by simply withdrawing from a market. So I think that's where investors can really help, is in your conversations with the companies that you work with or in the investments that you're making, looking for those companies that are really taking a long-term view. They're looking at what are the root causes of these major human rights issues and looking for companies that are trying to address those root causes. So that might be through working with governments, working with NGOs, or doing things to really strengthen and empower workers by working on things like living wages or worker empowerment.
I just want to say that investors continue to play a really important role in helping identify and address human rights issues across supply chains, particularly in food supply chains. And one important thing that they can do is really insist that companies they invest in and engage with have very robust human rights due diligence systems implemented top down, but also look to support actions from the ground up within production landscapes that try and tackle the systemic root causes of human rights issues.